Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. We have a great show for you today. I'm your host, Tommy Brzee. As always, it is Monday, April 15th, and the portal is getting very, very close to opening. It'll open tomorrow, probably, I think at midnight tonight, actually, is when it will officially open, but plenty of people have already entered their names or let their intentions known that they will be entering the portal, so wanted to break that down for you all and some players to watch throughout these next couple of weeks because there are some big names that could be on the move, definitely. Then we want to break down some spring game reactions for you all. A very, very busy day on Saturday, so we won't be able to jump around to every single game, but have some takeaways from the UGA, LSU, Ohio State, and Florida games, and then we'll kind of work our way through the rest of them as the next couple of days happen. But after that, we are going to jump into the Ole Miss spring game. A little bit of a different vibe out there in Oxford this Saturday, and kind of want to break down that and why I think this is something that a lot more teams are going to follow suit in. And then finally, we have a Good Vibes Monday to finish it off for you all, and we're going to talk about the College Football 25 game. We're getting closer and closer to that game coming out. And that means more and more details are coming out, and it just gets me more and more excited about this game. So definitely want to break that down for you all the updates there. But before we jump in, I do want to remind you all we get tons of questions and comments throughout the show. And the best way for you all to get your questions on the screen, we can have a fun back and forth here. You can ask a question that I maybe hadn't brought up. You can bring up a comment that I hadn't brought up. You can use the tip and donation link at the bottom of the screen, gsmcpodcast.net. It's a huge help not only to us here at the network, but to you all. It gets you a little bit more of an interactive experience here where you get to ask a question. I'll read it on air, and we get to answer it and kind of have a fun back and forth. But again, that's gsmcpodcast.net if you want to use that. But let's jump right in. The transfer portal is set to open tomorrow. It sounds like things are going to happen very quickly. Some stuff has already happened. It sounds like it's going to get even more crazy from here. So I've talked about this a lot. I won't bore you with any more stories or details or me worrying about this any longer. But what I will say is it sounds like this is going to be one of the crazier portal cycles that we have seen in a very long time, or maybe have ever seen. And I think part of that has to do with not a lot of people expect a lot from the spring portal for the most part. I mean, a lot of people put a lot of energy into the winter portal. A lot of people think that is where you're going to find your team. And logically, in the past, that's where you've been able to find your team. But the spring portal is going to be huge this year. And we've talked about kind of the repercussions of that and how it might be, an ugly couple of weeks here around college football. But I think in the long run, it really will help this sport kind of get back on the track that it needs to. So it's going to be an interesting couple of weeks. But before we kind of jump into the absolute madness, I do want to break down some of the big-time players that have already made their intentions known, some players that we already have an idea of where they're going to end up, and then get to some people that currently are on a roster, have not made their intentions known, but people are watching them around the industry very, very closely. So wanted to break all that down for you all, but let's start with the people that we know. And let's start with the most recent one to jump in, and that's Keandre Lambert-Smith, the wide receiver from Penn State. This is not good for Penn State. I'm not sure what happened there, so maybe it's honestly a good thing. Maybe he wasn't fitting into that locker room the way that they wanted. I don't know what the background behind this one was, but losing your top receiver from a year ago is never the thing you want, especially when wide receiver is a huge position of need for them. It just became an even bigger position of need over the next couple of weeks. But Keandre Lambert-Smith is very, very talented. He obviously is someone that can give very good reps for a number of different teams across the country. There are some teams that are definitely looking for some wide receiver help. So it'll be interesting to see where he ended up. I think James Franklin, after the game, was very tight-lipped about it. Basically just said he's happy to answer any questions about any of the players that are out there on Saturday and on the current roster. So it sounds like Keandre Lambert-Smith is out the door. He will have a pretty big market considering the number of teams that need wide receiver help and his production from a year ago. So obviously not what you wanted for Penn State. You do have Julian Fleming in there, which helps subside this just a little bit, but definitely they will be active throughout the portal, getting a new wide receiver, maybe a couple new wide receivers as to kind of fill that void that is being left by him. But let's move on over to Damian Martinez. I talked about him a little bit last week, and some things have kind of come out slowly as this is kind of drawn on, I suppose. There's been some type of idea of where he'll end up. Obviously, Michigan State is at the top of the list. His head coach, Jonathan Smith, took the job there. He said in winter, Damian Martinez, that is, said in winter that he was solid. He was not going anywhere from Oregon State. And then, some things transpired. I'm not exactly sure what happened. I don't know if it's just, he felt like he really wanted to play some high-level football. I mean, this is one of the best running backs in the entire country. So it makes sense to me. There were some rumors that he left $400,000 a year in NIL money on the table at Oregon State to find a new place to play. So obviously some people have been pointing towards, this was a money-type move for him to make as much money as possible this last year of college. And even if that was the case, I wouldn't necessarily blame him for that. But I tend to believe it's not. I think this is a kid that just really wants to play high-level football, and right now it doesn't look like Oregon State has a chance to do that next year. And it's not that, they can't build into something in the next couple of years, but if you're going to play mostly Mountain West teams and not be on national television all that often, it's not crazy for a guy like Damian Martinez to start looking elsewhere and trying to find a place where his skills can be put on full display. So Michigan State, we talked about. Miami and Tennessee are two teams that I've seen kind of tied to him. I think Miami is going to be very, very active, and I think running back is a position where they could use a little bit of help. I like their running back room. I think, Mark Fletcher, that's his name. Mark Fletcher is a very, very good running back, but you're going to need some help there for sure. So it's definitely, it'll be interesting to see if Mario Cristobal gets involved. But definitely a huge piece, probably the biggest name in the portal right now, and could be a huge player for someone this upcoming year. But let's move on to Samaje Burrell. He has added his name to the portal. He was a linebacker from Texas. It sounds like this has been kind of an interesting couple of weeks for him. He was involved in the incident with T'Vondre Sweat that led to T'Vondre Sweat getting a DWI last week, leading up to his NFL draft, which we talked about a little bit last week. Definitely not the best thing for T'Vondre Sweat leading up to the draft. Something he will have to answer for in these meetings coming up. But hopefully he can, get back on the right track and find a great place to play at the next level. And the same thing for Samaje Burrell. I mean, this is a very, very talented kid. He was suspended from the team for his involvement in that incident with T'Vondre Sweat and decided to enter the portal. This is a very talented kid, and I hope that he, finds a place where he can get back on track, put this behind him and kind of just get back to playing football. Obviously, kids make mistakes, and this was obviously a pretty big one, but hopefully he can kind of land on his feet and find a place that he can thrive. And there are a ton of places that will be after this kid because the talent is just off the charts. But also, coming from this, it sounds like Steve Sarkisian is being very strict about, kids getting in trouble with any type of trouble with the law or doing pretty much anything to threaten the way that they're building up Austin, Texas right now in the Texas program. It feels like he is pretty much a no-tolerance policy when it comes to that type of thing, and kids will be suspended from this team if they do misstep and kind of put in jeopardy what they're trying to build there in Austin. So it'll be really interesting to see if there's any others. Hopefully there isn't. Obviously, you never want that to happen, but Samaje Burrell, unfortunately, was suspended from the team, finds his way into the portal, and hopefully he'll land on his feet and find a great place to play the next time around. But let's move right along here, and kind of still on the Texas theme, honestly. Bill Norton is a D lineman from Arizona, started his career at UGA and played kind of rotational, mostly garbage time type snaps for the most part, and then transferred to Arizona a year ago, had 32 tackles during that, is a big-time run stuffer, and it looks like Texas is leading here. Obviously, they hired Johnny Nansen, who was the former Arizona defensive coordinator, hired him as the linebacker coach, so definitely gives them a leg up in that recruitment, and it sounds like that's where all the signs are pointing to right now. This would be a huge pickup for Texas for a number of reasons. They need defensive tackle help on the inside. It feels like that room is just a little bit thinner than they would have hoped. Obviously, losing two guys like Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy, it's going to be really hard to replace them. So it's going to be a little bit different of attack this year from Texas, but Bill Norton is huge for a number of reasons, and the biggest reason, in my opinion, is he's really, really stout against the run, and it's something that throughout spring camp and even last year a little bit, well, not really last year with the two guys they had up front, but throughout spring camp, that's been a huge worry. It feels like the offensive line is winning at the line of scrimmage, and the defensive line is doing a really, really, not a poor job, but just struggling to kind of hold that run game under wraps. So that's something that they're going to have to fix, and Bill Norton is a huge pickup to fix that. Another defensive lineman that is going to be huge is Jermaine Lowell, a lineman from Louisville. He was a 4-year player. He was someone that had numerous stats throughout his time at Louisville, and honestly very surprised that he was in the portal at all. But at the end of the day, this is going to be a big-time target for a number of teams. There are so many teams across the country that need interior defensive line help. We talked about Texas. Sounds like Bill Norton's going to help them out there, but Jermaine Lowell might be more talented than Bill Norton and definitely has more stats behind him than he does. So I wouldn't be surprised if Alabama got involved. I wouldn't be surprised if Georgia got involved, although their interior defensive line impressed me quite a bit on Saturday, but we'll get to that in the next segment. But this is a guy that will have a huge market, someone that definitely, I think at least, will end up at a school bigger than Louisville and will be a big-time player for someone. I think this might be the biggest guy that can make an immediate impact among these guys out here. But let's move right along. Nick Evers is another guy. He is the only quarterback on this list right now. He started his career at OU before going to Wisconsin a year ago. Didn't play much. Definitely was stuck kind of in that backup role. Played a little bit here and there, but didn't necessarily get on the field as much as he wanted. Sounds like he was taking a step back in the depth chart, so this makes total sense. I think he'll have a big-time market in the Group of 5 level. Not sure if the Power 5 teams are going to be really after him too much just because of the experience, but I think Group of 5 is where somewhere where he could really thrive. This guy has a very, very good arm, definitely can do a ton of really, really great things with the football, and I think he's someone that, while Power 5 schools might not be as interested, there will be plenty of Group of 5 schools calling him, and if he finds the right situation, he could blow up very quickly. Nigel Kelly is another one. This one's a depth chart casualty to me, although I think Miami is going to be very active in pretty much every position, but Ruben Bain and some younger guys have kind of asserted themselves, especially in that edge rusher position, but this kid can still play. He's very long, I think 6'6", is his measurement, so definitely someone that will have a big-time market and someone that some teams are going to need. There is definitely edge rushing needs around the country, and Nigel Kelly could definitely help someone, even if it's just as a rotational piece. But let's move right along here. Dallin Hayden, another depth chart casualty. He was stuck in that remarkable running back room up at Ohio State with Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson, and as you saw yesterday, both of those guys are beasts, and you do not want to be stuck behind them. So Dallin Hayden finding a new place to play. He is a very talented running back that just got stuck behind two of the top 5 running backs in the entire country. So makes total sense there. Miles Slusher is a safety from Colorado, which is another very interesting one. I think this one's more interesting because I expected him to be a big part of what they did up in Colorado this year. So this one is a little bit interesting. I'm not exactly sure if he was going to be the starter there across from Shiloh Sanders, but I tended to believe that was the case, and it would be very interesting to see kind of the fallout of this. Is Colorado in a bad spot at safety, or are they getting rid of someone they knew was out the door anyway? But then a couple other things here. Bear Alexander, it sounds like he is not in the portal. It sounds like he is committed to USC, wants to win a title there. And yeah, so it sounded like last week that he might be entering the portal. There were plenty of reports, but he shot those down pretty quickly, so he is not in the portal, and as of right now is fully committed to USC. And then Caden Proctor, we've talked about a lot. He will be committed to Alabama sometime very soon, if I had to imagine. He is a very talented kid that just kind of took a little sojourn to Iowa City and then found his way back to Tuscaloosa fairly quickly. But those are the guys we know. Those are the players that we are 100% sure of. But let's get to the players that we got to be watching very, very closely because it's going to be a weird couple of weeks. It's going to be some names will enter that you did not expect. Some names will commit to schools that you did not expect. But at the end of the day, there are definitely some big-time players that we need to be watching throughout this time. And I think it starts at Arizona with Noah Fifita and Tatori McMillan. During the winter portal, that was a big topic of conversation with Jed Fish taking the job at Washington. Were they going to follow? Were they going to be, the start of kind of the portal collapse for Arizona? But they stayed firm. They wanted to be in Tucson. They decided that they were going to stay put for the time being, and they've stayed pretty much steadfast in that. They have not shown any necessarily shown any signs that they want out or they are going to leave. But at the end of the day, Damian Martinez didn't show many signs before he jumped in. So I think this is one where Brent Brennan and that entire staff is just going to have to have eyes on them for the next 15 days. They just want to be as locked in as possible, make sure that these kids are on campus at the end of this and are leading you into next season, because if they walk out the door, then things get bad pretty quickly for Tucson, or in Tucson, and it doesn't get better anytime soon. So Noah Fifita and Tatori McMillan, while look solid right now, definitely people to watch as this goes on, because as we know, it's a shady business and things can change very, very quickly. Another one that I'm watching in particular is someone from the Bama room and someone from the Ohio State room, quarterback room that is, will find their way into the portal. Ohio State, I feel like it's going to be Lincoln Kienholz. He played a little bit during the game, but he's just stuck in kind of a gray area between these two. Will Howard and Devin Brown are battling for that starting job. In fact, we'll get to that in the next segment, but they're up top battling for that job. And then you have Julian Sain and Aaron Nolan, who are young kids coming in, who are the future of that position. Neither of those feel like positions where they're going to want to enter the transfer portal. Lincoln Kienholz is in a position where he's going into his second year. He's still sitting who knows where on that depth chart with quarterbacks, and I wouldn't be surprised if he found his way into the portal. It could be that another guy from Ohio State's room also does as well, but I would be a little bit surprised unless some conversations that I didn't expect to happen are happening right now. Then I think it'll just be one casualty, and I very much expect that to be Lincoln Kienholz, who is a very good quarterback and is someone that is going to be, a big-time player for someone. But at the end of the day, when you're stuck between five guys that can play high-level football, it's really tough. There's no two ways about that. And then you talk about Bama. I would lean towards Dylan Lonergan or Ty Simpson, mostly because they are the Saban quarterbacks. They are not, the Kalen DeBoer quarterbacks. Austin Mack came over from Washington with Kalen DeBoer, which I think gives him a little bit more of a leg up. Now, Ty Simpson was great in the spring game and did a lot of really good things. Dylan Lonergan, I think, will be the guy at the end of the day, but I wouldn't be surprised if Ty Simpson followed him, because Ty Simpson has sat there for quite some time. He has been sitting there and just kind of waiting his turn very patiently, and Jalen Milroe is not giving up this job. He had a really, really good day on Saturday and proved that he's made the strides necessary. So it's going to be Jalen Milroe. We know that pretty much unequivocally. Now, after that, it feels like Austin Mack keeps making more and more strides in this offense and keeps kind of carving out that position for himself. So I wouldn't be surprised if both those guys were in the portal. I hope that wherever they go, both these guys are very, very talented, have very bright futures in front of them, but I want to see them on the football field. So you don't want them to get caught up in the have to go Power 5 or bust type of mentality, which definitely is a thing in this transfer portal world. But Ty Simpson, Dylan Lonergan are two guys that could be huge-time starters for maybe just a little bit smaller of programs. So it'll be interesting to see how all of this kind of shakes out. It could be Austin Mack that enters the portal for all I know. But for the time being, I'd lean towards Dylan Lonergan and then keep one eye on Ty Simpson for sure just throughout this process, because it sounds more and more like his time to be the starting quarterback at Alabama might have passed already, but we'll see what happens there. And then two other players that Will Backus from CBS kind of pointed out that I hadn't thought of are Ricky White from UNLV and Omarion Hampton from UNC. And we'll start with Ricky White, who might be someone that you guys are not super familiar with, was an absolute beast last year for UNLV, and they were able to fend off a lot of suitors in the winter window, but the need has only gotten bigger for a number of teams. We talked about Penn State earlier. There are so many teams out there that need wide receiver help, and as they become more desperate, that money value becomes more and more high. So it'll be really interesting to see how that develops. I think whoever he goes to, he will be an instant impact guy. So it'll be interesting. I hope UNLV can hold on to him because I'd love to see, that UNLV offense with Ricky White and with all of the ability they have around him to kind of blow up. But at the end of the day, he will be highly sought after, and the amount of money being thrown at this kid will be very surprising. I'll be totally honest. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. I think that he, for the time being, is not in the portal. For the time being, seems to be solid towards UNLV, but as we talked about earlier, things change very, very quickly. And then Omarion Hampton is another guy that UNC just has to keep on campus. It as big of a deal as it was a year ago to keep Drake May on campus, because Drake May apparently turned down a big-time payday last year. Mac Brown has talked about that pretty openly, and Omarion Hampton will get a similar type payday if things go the way I expect them to go in this portal class. So there are tons of people that need running back help. We talked about Miami. Ole Miss is another one. So he's going to be someone that's super highly sought after, and hopefully UNC can keep him in Chapel Hill, but it's going to be tough. There's going to be tons of teams after him, and maybe tons of teams that can offer something that UNC can't, which is a big-time payday. But it'll be interesting to see what happens there. I think Omarion Hampton is one of the best running backs, if not the best in the entire country, so whoever gets him, hopefully it's UNC, hopefully he stays put, but whoever ends up getting him, if he does find a new place to play, is going to be very, very happy they did, because he's an absolute game changer. But this is going to be a wild cycle. It's going to be all over the place. I will try to keep you all updated as much as I possibly can. There will be names going out in and out every single day, so check out all the shorts and all of that type of stuff for every single update, but probably maybe a segment every couple of days just to break down where we're at, what new names have joined, where they might be ending up, and try to keep you all updated as a lot of rosters change around the country, because it's going to be wild. And hopefully on, April 30th, we can look back on this and say, that was crazy, but hopefully it leads to good change around this sport. But for the time being, it's going to be off the walls. And we're going to see a lot of names that we didn't expect, but that's part of the game right now. So I'll keep you updated as more and more names join, as everything kind of changes throughout the next couple of weeks. But for the time being, we're going to take our first break here, and when we come back, we're going to talk about spring games. There were a ton of spring games on Saturday, so only broke down 4 for you today, and we'll continue that through the next couple of days as we get through the just massive amounts of games that happened yesterday. But for the time being, we're going to take our break, and we will be right back with that, so stick with us.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows where 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about the transfer portal coming up and some of the things to expect, some players to watch, and some players that have already made their intentions known to enter the portal. But let's get to some spring game takeaways. And we have UGA, Ohio State, LSU, and Florida for you today. And we're going to start in Athens, Georgia. We'll start with the big dogs and UGA. And this was an interesting game. This was a game that looked a lot like a real college football game. This was two of honestly the best teams in the country going at it, if we're being totally honest. When you look at that number one offense and that number one defense, it might be the best sides they face all year, and they've pointed that out a number of times throughout the broadcast. But let's start with Carson Beck, because that's where it's all going to start with UGA all year. He had kind of an interesting day. He had two picks, which were not ideal by any means. C.J. Allen made a remarkable play on one of them, but every other pass, it felt like, was where it needed to be. Every other opportunity he had, he did not miss. He made a number of really, really good passes. One to Dominic Lovett down the sideline. A couple on the last drive that were just remarkable. So Carson Beck, although, you see those two picks and you get a little bit nervous, I think that's just a product of facing the defense that he was facing. And it might just be the best one he faces all year. I think Bama will give them a run for their money, but at the end of the day, this is a very big test for Carson Beck, and I think he did plenty for me to feel very confident about him going into 2024. And then let's get to this running back room, because it's just loaded. Roderick Robinson was the guy that got the first carries of the game, and he is scary with the ball in his hands. He is not necessarily the most physical guy in the world. He still has crazy amounts of speed to him, but when he hits you really hard. And he's very, very aggressive at the point of attack. He's someone that's going to be literally impossible to keep off the field if you're Georgia this year. He's made so many strides from his freshman year, where he was kind of thrust into action with some injuries there at running back, and he's really built off that. He's been really remarkable throughout spring, and might just be the guy that trots out there first overall in the first game of the fall. It would be really remarkable to see. And then you talk about someone like Trevor Etienne, who came over from Florida, and he showed exactly what I needed him to show. If you're a Georgia fan, I think you're watching this thinking, Etienne, you'd love for him to be the guy, the go-to guy every single down. But when you have the number of running backs they do, it's going to be really hard for that to be the case. So with Etienne, it's all about his speed. It's all about his receiving ability. It's all about his ability to kind of keep defenses on their toes, and he did that really, really well on Saturday. It felt like he was getting more and more comfortable in the offense, and I tend to think he'll still be the starter, just because I think he'll make more and more strides throughout the summer into the fall camp. But there's a number of guys that could do it. They could send out Andrew Paul, who had an incredible day on Saturday and ran very physically as well. They could send him out there, and they would have no problem. Branson Robinson's still coming back from injury. So this running back room, as always, is just terrifying in every sense of the word. But Dylan Bell seems to be kind of the go-to guy for Beck, at least early on. That's what it looked like. Dylan Bell and him kind of made a very, very good connection last year, and he's going to be a huge part of this offense, so very excited about that. But the wide receiver that made all the noise yesterday was Dominic Lovett. He looked so much more comfortable in this offense from a year ago. He made a number of really, really good catches, including the insane one for the game-tying catch that sent him barreling into the hedges out there. But he was someone that really, really stood out, probably the player of the game as you go throughout the offense and the defensive side of the ball, and played exactly how you needed them to play. I think he will likely be the leading receiver for UGA, at least right now. That's kind of where I'm leaning. And then you talk about Colby Young, someone they brought in from Miami, an absolute dude. He is someone that they have been missing in past years, especially last year when you lose someone like A.D. Mitchell to Texas. They didn't really have that 50-50 guy in the end zone. Now, they use Brock Bowers from time to time there, but having Colby Young is an absolute luxury. I think he will be the touchdown leader on this team. I think he'll be absolutely huge for this team in the red zone. And whenever you have a guy that you can just throw it up and feel comfortable that he's going to come down with it. It is a luxury that not everyone has. So Colby Young's going to be huge for them. On the defensive side of the ball, the younger defenders really looked the part. It felt like KJ Bolden, he made a couple of mistakes early on, but he got more and more comfortable as it went on. Ellis Robinson, the exact same. Chris Cole had a couple of nice plays. You had Justin Williams that did a number of nice things. So UGA is doing what they always do. They have NFL guys just littered all over this team. It's just ridiculous to see what they can do on both sides of the ball. And the offense, the one thing that really, really stood out, although Dominic Lovett was kind of the guy that stood out, there's so many weapons on this team. If you try to guard all the weapons, first of all, you're probably not going to be able to. And even if you can, the ball is going to be placed really, really perfectly. And you're going to have to defend it as perfectly as the ball is placed to get any type of pass breakup, any type of effective play on these wide receivers and these tight ends, because the ways they can attack you is just insane. And then finally, on the offensive side of the ball, actually, Anthony Evans is an absolute game changer. This is actually offense and special teams. He's someone that every time the ball is in his hands, you have to watch the TV, because the dude can essentially, whenever it's in his hands, he is a threat to go to the end zone. He is someone that is a total difference maker for this team, and I would be very surprised if he wasn't making a couple plays that won them a couple of games this upcoming year, because with him returning punts, it is as big of a game changer you can have in that position across the country. And then CJ Allen on the defensive side of the ball, he's the guy. He's the guy that all UGA fans were hoping he would be. I think he has the chance to be a Roquan Smith level linebacker at UGA, an absolute game changer. He's so aggressive, so fast. I think this team is just remarkable. And then you talk about the player of the game on the defensive side of the ball. It's Mykel Williams. He was all over the place. He had a pick on a remarkable batted pass that he ended up catching, and the dude's athleticism is off the charts. He is going to be all over the place in 2024. They're letting him, have his hand in the ground sometimes, not have his hand in the ground. They're playing very versatile with him, and it's definitely paying dividends early on. So overall, this game was iron sharpens iron. It was every UGA practice the way you would expect it. These guys were going after each other. It was incredible. There were NFL talent just all over the field, and it really showed. So very, very impressive showing. I think this team could honestly be better than the last 3 years, and I'm not even joking. I think they are so complete. They are terrifying on offense in so many different ways that this team is going to be downright scary. But I feel like we knew that going in. But let's jump on over to LSU and let's talk about Garrett Nussmeier, because he was the talk of the day. He was absolutely perfect, and that's music to LSU fans' ears. There's no two ways about that. They definitely wanted a great day from Garrett Nussmeier. The problem is it came with not a ton of resistance, which is something that sounds like nails on a chalkboard when you talk to LSU fans, because the defense was downright bad last year. There's no two ways about that. It just looked ugly, and it did not look a lot better in the spring game, to be totally honest. Now, there were some bright spots that I'll get to here in a second, but continuing on with the offense, Ricky Collins looks like he's shaping up to be the QB2, still fighting with AJ Swan, who is a Vandy transfer, but a very, very talented kid that I think will be ready to roll whenever he needs to take over, whether that's 25 or 26, probably 26 if I had to guess, but who knows? Garrett Nussmeier can put up some crazy numbers this year, I promise you that. And then you talk about the wide receiver group. CJ Daniels showed out. He was a Liberty transfer at wide receiver, flashed big time in this game. Kyron Lacey looked the part. I don't think any LSU fans are worried about him. Aaron Anderson showed some of his speed that he has. Shelton Sampson Jr. Was targeted a few times, made some catches, definitely some good things out of that wide receiver room. Chris Hilton had a big-time drop earlier in the game that definitely could hurt him a little bit. I mean, this is a loaded wide receiver room, and Chris Hilton is kind of in that gray area of that room. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with him if he's rolling with the ones once fall camp comes around. It'll be interesting to see if he, jumps in the portal. You don't know what conversations are happening right now. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens with that group in particular, because it's a very deep group with a ton of very talented guys that would be getting plenty of offers right now if they were in the portal. And then Kamarion Pimpton, a tight end, looked very, very smooth. He was someone coming out of high school that a lot of people were after. He's, I believe, 6'6", and just very smooth in his route running. I think him next to Mason Taylor is going to be a sight to behold. And then the O-line looked as everyone would expect, absolutely dominant. Will Campbell and Emory Jones holding down the corners of this offensive line is a remarkable luxury that Garrett Nussmeier has to build off of as a starter. So everything on the offensive side of the ball seems all systems go. The run game looked really good. I think they could add a running back throughout this process if the right one came available, but for the time being, I mean, this offense looks as good as it did a year ago. It's just remarkable the ability that they have in that room, especially across the offensive line, which makes everything a little bit easier. But let's get to the defensive side of the ball, where things were a little bit up and down. There were a couple of guys that flash. Gabriel Rilliford is someone that was an early enrollee defensive lineman, played against kind of the backup, so didn't face the Will Campbells, the Emory Joneses of the world, but still had a big-time showing and definitely flashed in some ways that LSU fans have got to love with that point of attack, that they need to be a lot better. It seems like the point of attack, although, the names aren't necessarily off the charts, it seems like in the short time he's been there, Bo Davis has made at least somewhat of an impact on that room and made them a little bit stronger, but that back end just does not look very strong. Jair Brown, the OSU transfer from Ohio State, was the light point of that back end and definitely made some good plays throughout the game, but there were some broken coverages that looked a lot like last year. There was some worry for sure, and I think they will be very active on the defensive side of the ball throughout the next couple of weeks, kind of just picking up what they can, because they're going to need a ton of help, especially on that back end, just to put together a good five. So LSU, you kind of walked out of there feeling like it's going to look a lot like 2023. Hopefully that changes throughout the next little bit, but for the time being, LSU feels like they might just get a repeat, which would not be ideal by any means. But let's move on to Ohio State, and this one was a really interesting one. It was a little bit all over the place. It felt like the quarterbacks, had very up and down days pretty much across the board, but the top two guys that we have to talk about are Will Howard and Devin Brown. For the most part, it felt like Will Howard was the most comfortable throughout the game, at least consistency-wise. It felt like Devin Brown missed a couple early on, but got more comfortable, started making some plays with his legs, did a number of really, really good things, but the guy that stood out was Julian Sayin to me. He made a couple of mistakes that are freshman mistakes. They're going to happen, but he looks like the quarterback that Ryan Day really wants for this offense, and I think he's going to have to wait a year for that to happen because Julian Sayin is still pretty early on in his kind of process of developing, but at the end of the day, I think he's a very talented kid that could take this Ohio State offense to where they should be, which is right up at the top of the country. So it'll be really interesting to see all of this develop. I think Will Howard, right now, I would say, is in the lead to be the starter, but Devin Brown is right on his heels, and it's going to go all the way to fall camp and maybe up until week 1, to be totally honest with you. But the good news for Ohio State fans is this might be the last year where you have to worry about, who you're going to put out at quarterback and is that guy going to be effective, because I think Julian Sayin is an absolute game changer. I think he's someone that Ohio State fans have been kind of waiting for since C.J. Stroud walked out the door. So very excited about that, but that's obviously still a ways away. On the defensive side of the ball, though, these corners are really good, pretty much across the board. Noah Igbinosun made a number of really good plays. Denzel Burke is a very experienced guy that I'm not worried about at all. But Jordan Hancock was the guy that really, really stood out. He made a number of really, really good plays. He is someone that is probably going to be a little bit rotational, might play a little bit of nickelback for them throughout the season, but he's awesome. He's someone that, you would usually have as an absolute lockdown corner, holding down a spot for quite some time, but it's not that way, and it's good for Ohio State because it just gives you even more depth on that back end. It honestly might be the best back end in the entire country, especially with the addition of Caleb Downs. You have Lathan Ransom back there. I mean, it's just insane what they have on that back end of that defense. But moving back to the offensive side of the ball, the O-line is a little bit worrisome. I won't lie to you. This defensive line is incredible, to be fair, and they are going to abuse plenty of offensive lines, but they were all over these quarterbacks a lot of the game. They did a lot of things that O-lines elite O-lines at the very least would not let happen. So I think that's definitely something to watch for as we go throughout this process. Ohio State just has to be active. They have to find a couple more offensive linemen, even if they're rotational guys, just to give you some options. I think they're going to need at least a couple of guys to be coming in just to give them a little peace of mind going into summer and then into fall camp. But the good news for them is even with this offensive line, even with, a quarterback that might not meet the lofty expectations of an Ohio State quarterback, this wide receiver room is out of this world. We knew that they were out of this world. We knew that, Emeka Egbuka was going to be awesome. We hadn't seen Jeremiah Smith yet, but we'd seen plenty of clips. But this dude is a game changer. He is insane. Watching him on the football field is something that is totally different than anything that I've ever seen. He is someone that you throw it at him, it's a catch. You throw it near him, it's a catch, to be totally honest with you. He was compared to LeBron James on the broadcast, so gives you an idea of the athlete that you're dealing with. Obviously, that's very, very lofty, and he might not be LeBron James level, but the dude is a game changer. He's going to be the entirety of his time at Ohio State. He's going to be maybe one of the best wide receivers to ever walk through there, but he's still got plenty of work to do. He's definitely someone that is a total difference maker and will be all over the field this fall, but it's going to be a long time. He's going to be in Columbus, and Ohio State fans have to love that. At least 3 years that you get to hold on to him, and it's going to be a special 3 years, I can tell you that. But let's get to the back end of this quarterback room. We talked about it a little bit earlier when we were talking about the portal, but Julian Sayin looked more comfortable as he went throughout the day. He's someone that I think Ryan Day really likes. I think he could definitely take over once Will Howard or Devin Brown moves on. And then you have Aaron Nolan. He's just electric. He can make every single play, can escape with his leg, can do a number of really good things, led an awesome touchdown drive throughout the day. And it's just going to be incredible to watch this quarterback room kind of take shape, where everyone sits at the end of the day, and especially where everyone sits going into 2025, because I don't know what the plan is for Devin Brown. I don't know what Aaron Nolan and Julian Sayin are going to look like, but I tend to believe those are the two that are going to be battling it out for that position, and it's going to be something to behold. There's no two ways about that. So overall, this was a interesting showing from Ohio State. I think the defense, showed exactly who they are. They're going to be dominant. They're going to be absolutely all over the place this year, but definitely some worries throughout that entire thing, and definitely some things that they're going to have to clean up, especially at the offensive line. I think that's probably going to be the biggest area of emphasis, but most of the stuff is in place, and I think if you're Ohio State, you got to feel at least okay coming out of that game, and feel like you have the team that a lot of people expect you to have. But finally, let's roll through Florida here pretty quickly, because I'm taking up quite a bit of time with these two segments here. But DJ Lagway absolutely stole the show. He went for over 150 yards, 2 touchdowns, definitely had some freshman mistakes, had a pick where he kind of stared the defender in, but overall looked really good, looked like the guy that Florida fans want him to be. The defense is something to worry about, again. It's something that I think a lot of us expected, but the back end of this defense just does not look very good. Eugene Wilson was wide open for a touchdown pass from Graham Mertz early in the day. I think Eugene Wilson, side note, is definitely going to be the number one guy for this team. He is a breakout star that is happening before our eyes, and it's really, really cool to see. Mertz had a really solid stat line, went 15 for 27, 243, and a touchdown. He did have an interception, but he looks like he's getting more and more comfortable, throwing to every point of the field, doing the things that we talked about last week where you got to start making those downfield aggressive shots. It felt like he was more comfortable doing that on Saturday. So I think that's huge for this team, and definitely could take them to the next level this year and keep Billy Napier in Gainesville, which is the hope. But the story for LSU could be the same for Florida. It feels like this defense is something that could really hold them back the same way it did in 2023. Obviously, that offense didn't necessarily hit every single week, but at the end of the day, the offense was miles ahead of the defense a year ago, and it feels like that's kind of the same story this year. Now, still plenty of time to go. LJ McCray made a couple of big plays, the freshman D lineman. They had a couple of players show up at the very least. But the defensive staff and Billy Napier are absolutely going to be up against it this year. They're going to play a lot of really good offenses, and if they can't keep that team, on the same page, if they don't necessarily have to be dominant on that side of the ball, and they probably won't be, but you can be tough to beat. You can be bend, don't break. You can be opportunistic with picks and fumbles. And I think that's kind of be the key to keep Billy Napier, in Gainesville for another year, keep this thing rolling, and hopefully, continue some good memories for Florida fans here down the road. But as you all know, spring's somewhat of a zero-sum game. You don't necessarily able to pull too much out of it, but there's, some breakout players. There's some things of that nature that definitely pop up. Obviously, we did not get to Bama, Penn State, TCU, or Tennessee, a ton of other teams that played on Saturday, so we will get to those through the next couple of days, probably break down at least a couple of days, so definitely tune in for that. But we're going to take our second break here a little bit late here, but we're going to take our second break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the unique spring game if you want to call it, that happened in Oxford yesterday. Ole Miss is kind of setting a new precedent for what spring might look like in the future. So I want to break that down and my thoughts on that right after this.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about a little bit of the spring games that happened on Saturday, some takeaways from there, but we will continue that throughout the week because there were so many on Saturday that we need to break down. But let's jump into what happened in Oxford, Mississippi for their spring game, the Grove Bowl games as they called it. As there were, very serious scrimmages in games around the country. You had coaches screaming at their team. You had everything going off the walls all over the place. Ole Miss was just kind of hanging out, having a little field day down in Oxford, Mississippi. And honestly, I thought it was really cool. John Talty over at CBS had an awesome piece about it that I pulled a little bit of this from, but it's just it's something that I had never seen. Honestly, I thought they were playing a totally normal spring game until I saw some of the clips pop out of them doing tug of war and Joey Chestnut eating 20 hot dogs in 90 seconds and Brandon Turnage throwing down a dunk that is mind-boggling. The athleticism on that kid is out of this world. You had some competitions that resemble like the Pro Bowl in the NFL. You had the Gauntlet that is a big-time Pro Bowl thing. They were pushing Lane Kiffin's father in a golf cart to end that one out by the linemen. So there was a lot of fun to be had. The football part of this was a 7-on-7 type format, so not a ton to pull from the football aspect of this, but it was really interesting. It was something that I think all of us were waiting for the next clip to come out on Twitter or whatever and, see what happened next in Oxford. But they asked Lane Kiffin about this and why he kind of went this direction instead of having a typical spring game. And he had a very interesting quote that I I want to read to you all here. He said, really, the value of spring games, in my opinion, is overrated because you don't show many plays on offense or defense. He said most people don't unless they're trying to win over the fans or win over the TV Most people don't unless they're trying to win the fans over or TV over with the game. You really don't get a whole lot of it. So essentially what he's saying is these spring games only tell us so much. We've talked about it a number of times. You got to take everything with a grain of salt. You can't necessarily come out of spring games saying this guy is unequivocally the starter. Because if you're watching the UGA game yesterday and you did that, you might have come out that saying Gunnar Stockton should be QB1, which obviously is not going to happen and obviously is something that shouldn't happen. But it's very interesting to kind of hear it from a coach because, to my knowledge, this is the first time that they've said it in that clear of terms and actually taken action to do something different. So I kind of applaud Lane Kiffin for doing this. I think this is something that a lot of coaches have honestly kicked around the idea of, but no one was kind of willing to take that leap, and he finally did, and it really gave off you remember a field day in grade school when you would split up into a bunch of different teams and you would go at it with some of your buddies. It felt like that. It felt like everyone was out there just having a good time, enjoying the day, doing the things that, you don't get to do all that often with the amount of rigor, the amount of intensity that is put on you every single day. There's not necessarily this all these chances to unleash all that stress and kind of enjoy the day and just forget about football for a second. And I think that's what Lane Kiffin gave them. And I think there's a lot of things that go into this. There's a lot of different reasons why I think this is an awesome idea. But I'll start with kind of the most glaring one is you likely come out with everyone healthy, which is the biggest thing in the world. Obviously, when Brandon Turnage was up doing I think he did a windmill reverse dunk during that dunk contest. I'm sure Lane Kiffin was holding his breath just a little bit, but at the end of the day, everyone came out healthy. Everyone came out, having a good time with his friends, and it likely really helped that locker room. I think that's something that kind of gets lost in all of this is these coaches every single year, they are working to keep that roster intact. They are working to make sure that no one is poached, that no one is taken from some other teams, and Lane Kiffin is doing everything in his ability to create an atmosphere that kids just want to be in, whether it's them playing or whether it's them sitting on the bench, creating this atmosphere where they show up to the facilities and feel like they're at home. They feel like they're around buddies. They feel like, everything is very comfortable there. It's huge. It's something that might get kind of overlooked in this, new era of college football where you have to worry about a million different things. But doing all of this, chaotic, goofy type spring game stuff, doing all these things that people don't normally do, I think gives him a leg up in a number of different ways. And one of the things that John Talty broke down here that I thought was really interesting that honestly I hadn't thought about in all of this is the transfer portal is opening tomorrow. We just talked about that. And as of right now, I think you'd be hard-pressed to find an Ole Miss football player that is unhappy about how Saturday went, is unhappy with the situation that they're in, is unhappy being at Ole Miss. So that's a huge part of this. You didn't have to put out a depth chart. You didn't have to have, real guys getting run over by someone else and saying, maybe I'm not supposed to be on this team. You didn't have you didn't have players getting an idea of where they sit in all of this. And, some of that is maybe, not the best thing for the player in the vein of some of these players could find another place to play. But at the end of the day, it's all about just these players being happy. And if they're, in a position where they're really into the team, they love their teammates, they're happy that they're at the place that they're at, I think that's a huge plus. And I think one of the things we get caught up with in spring ball and these spring games in particular is you want to see a lot. You want to see something. You want to see something that will help you on Saturdays or will at least, lend itself to Saturdays. But for the most part, spring games don't necessarily do that all that often just because of the limited playbook like Lane Kiffin was talking about or just the rotations and things like that. It's not necessarily a normal game day, so it doesn't necessarily help you too much on Saturdays regardless. But I know for a fact that what Lane Kiffin did this weekend, what Ole Miss did this weekend, will help them every single other day. I think there's no question in my mind that all of this stuff it's not about Saturdays in the fall. It's about Mondays through Fridays. It's about, keeping these guys connected. It's about Jackson Dart, being able to hit up the wide receivers throughout this time when they're not around the team and get together to run routes and go through drills and do that type of thing. This is a huge step to doing that. I think we all know that these months in between spring practice and fall camp are super important for a team to be successful, and especially a team like Ole Miss with so many transfer portal kids coming in, it's going to be even more important. And now Lane Kiffin has given them a moment that they're all together, that they're all pulling in the same direction, and it's huge. I think it's something that a lot more people will follow suit in. Lane Kiffin is very much hoping they won't. It sounds like he definitely wants to see other teams play in spring, wants to be able to scout them, but doesn't want teams to be able to scout him. So it'll be really interesting to see if other people follow suit. I love this idea. I think it's something that you take a day that could be really serious and intense and a little bit nerve-wracking for kids, and you make it really fun, and you give these kids, a little bit of a release from all of the intense things that they're going through on a daily basis, and you let them go out there and have fun for a day, and then you reconvene and talk football at another time. So I think this is something that Lane and Ole Miss have always been different, but I really love this path that they're going down. I think this is something that could be good for them. I think it could be good for college football, and could definitely give Ole Miss a little bit of a leg up on some other teams in terms of just being one, being together at all times, being pulling in the same direction, knowing what the other guys are about. And I think that's something that can be huge in this day of college football. So it'll be really interesting to see if others follow suit. I love this idea. I think others will follow suit, but for the time being, Ole Miss is doing something unique, and you gotta love to see it. So that's really cool. Definitely will keep my eye out on anyone else following suit on that in the coming years. But for the time being, we're going to take our last break, and when we come back, we're going to get to a Good Vibes Monday. And today we're going to talk about College Football 25. It feels like we're getting closer and closer to a actual release of this game, and very, very excited. So we will break that down right after this, so stick with us.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about the Grove Bowl games that happened in Oxford, and kind of why I think they're really cool and something that a lot of teams will definitely follow suit on in the future. But let's jump into the College Football 25 update. This is the game that we've been all waiting for quite some time. We are getting closer and closer to it being released. And as more and more news comes out, I get more and more excited. I think this game is going to be awesome. It feels like they're putting in insane amounts of effort to make sure that this is exactly what the fans want. And I know there are plenty of fans that are putting a lot of pressure on this game, putting a lot of energy into this game being perfect, being exactly what they envisioned, and hopefully it'll be as close to that as we can hope. But let's start with some of the updates that have kind of happened throughout the last week, and then give you an idea of where we're at right now, and some updates that are coming down the road here pretty soon. But let's start with Chris Fowler. He has done an incredible job keeping the fans up to date with his recording sessions, kind of what's happening, some things to look for throughout the game. And he had one last week where he was talking about his recording sessions, and it feels like he is getting close to finishing them up. It sounds like he only has one more really, really long recording session ahead of him, which is recording all of the names into the game. So everyone that is opted in, it sounds like it's around 10,000 of the 11,000 that were sent out. Arch Manning is obviously the big name that has been left out of that group. We'll see if he ends up joining. I think there's one more window to join up, so maybe that's not done with. I don't know. But at the end of the day, it sounds like the vast majority of these players will be in the game, and Chris Fowler will be responsible for saying all of them over and over and over again here pretty soon. But it sounds like that will be the end of his time doing it. Chris Fowler and Kirk Herbstreit, it feels like they are cutting no corners to make this game incredible for the fans. They have done multiple recording sessions where they record the same things over and over just to make sure that they are as energetic as they possibly can be. They fit the moment as possibly as well as possible, and do the things that we all want them to do. You know, we love having those voices over the games, but it can be a little bit underwhelming at times when it, doesn't necessarily hit the same as a normal Saturday in the fall. So I think they're doing, everything in their power to make this as fun of a game for the fans as possible. So obviously really appreciate what they're doing for this game. It's definitely something that I'm very excited about. The two best voices in the sport, if you were to ask me, with Gus Johnson and Joel Klatt just right behind him. But I think it's just incredible to see, two guys that are at the very top of this sport and are at the forefront of this sport, taking something like this so seriously because they know the fans care so much. I think it's something that is really, really cool. But we're getting more and more details. I've seen a couple of renderings of mascots that look really cool that get me excited. I've seen some different graphics and things kind of pop out from time to time. There have been posters being put up around the country to promote the game. They have, the team name. They have a couple of the players that will be in the game. In fact, they were so cool that I think a couple of them are residing in a frat house in Columbus, Ohio right now. So respect to those guys. I think I would have done the exact same thing if I was able to. But I think that's a really cool way to promote this game. Definitely get the people excited when you walk past those signs and you see, you'll get to play with Will Howard, you get to play with Jeremiah Smith or Quinn Ewers or Carson Beck or whoever. I think it's something that definitely gets us all excited. It's something that when you were playing the games, 2014 and before that, it wasn't necessarily that you were upset that they weren't in the game. You still got plenty of fun out of that game, but seeing QB number 12 instead of Colt McCoy is a little bit different, right? You definitely love to see, Quinn Ewers out there, or some of the big names that we have around college football. You see Shadur Sanders, Travis Hunter, which is a segment we will do tomorrow actually on them. But having those guys in the game, being able to see the players that you see on Saturdays is something that I think can't be overstated. It's something that will bring players even further into the game, get them more excited about the game, and make roster building that much more fun. So I think that's probably the coolest part of this game. I think everyone kind of agrees that's the coolest part of this game. But another really cool thing happening around the country is the social teams for all of these teams around the country are starting to use this. They are asking the players what their ratings are going to be throughout in the new game, what they think they're going to be rated as, and a lot of these guys have some lofty expectations. I think they're going to be a little bit upset by the number that comes out for the vast majority of these guys, but it's their first video game. These Madden guys fully understand that they're going to get undervalued, but these college guys might be a little bit behind the 8 ball on that one, but they'll learn fairly quickly. But let's get to some of the features we absolutely know are in the game, and then just some updates and some things that are kind of coming down the road here pretty soon. So obviously, as I talked about earlier, it sounds like over 10,000 players are in the game. Just an insane clip that they were able to get from 11,000 invitations that were sent out. So obviously the players really want to be in this one, partly because they grew up the same time I did. They grew up, right in the mix of this game and definitely want to be a part of it. So it totally makes sense to me for that. And then you have 134 FBS teams all in the game. Every single FBS team will be in the game. Now, FCS seems like it's going to be coming a little bit further down the road. In the former games, you used to have like FCS Southwestern, and I think you only had 4 FCS schools, but I think they'll build it out and have, all the schools here pretty soon, probably in the coming years. But for right now, it's just the FBS teams, and still plenty of great teams to pick from. No two ways about that. You have NIL and the transfer portal in the game. Not exactly sure what the exact parameters of that will look like, but we'll find out more and more as it gets closer and closer. But that'll be a really interesting kind of introduction into this game that was not there before in the former games. But it'll be really interesting to see how that kind of unfolds. You have conferences. Sounds like they're going to be customizable, which is very interesting, and we will see a ton of different configurations with those conferences. The Heisman is in the game. The other big awards like the Biletnikoff, the Joe Moore Award, Davey O'Brien, all of those big-time awards are not. So the Heisman is the only big-time award in the game. Definitely not what you wanted, but I think those other awards will probably come around here pretty soon in the next couple of years as more games come out. All the bowl games have opted in, I believe. I'm not sure if there's any holdouts left. The Pop-Tart Bowl has opted in, which is just huge. Absolutely awesome for so many reasons. If they somehow have the edible mascot in the game, it'll be a total game changer. I'll be all over that game very, very quickly. But College Game Day is also in the game. You have to love that. I think this is something that will add a little bit to the game for sure. Obviously, some of us will just skip straight through to the game, skip over the College Game Day guys, but it'll be fun to see for sure, and definitely will give us some of that Saturday in fall vibes that we are looking for in this game. But a lot of this, a lot of the rumors and this might be in the game, this could be in the game. A lot of that will be subsided on May 16th. It sounds like a full reveal is coming out that day, and we're going to be able to see a ton of different stuff, possibly some gameplay of the game. We'll be able to get an idea of what the transfer portal, what NIL will look like, how many players are in the game, that type of thing. So very excited about that. I think that's the day that everyone's really, really looking forward to. And the release day has kind of been rumored. July 19th has been one I've seen thrown out there. I've seen July 12th as well. So not exactly sure when that day is going to be. Maybe it'll come out on May 16th, to be totally honest. But cannot wait for this game. I think it's going to be just incredible, and I will be locking myself in a room for probably around 72 hours to be able to play this game all the way through, maybe take the Buffalo Bulls to the national title, but we'll see. It'll be really interesting to see this game, lead up to it, and I just cannot wait until it comes out. But until then, we have to wait. So it'll be interesting to see this develop. I cannot wait for this game to come out. We'll keep you updated on anything that comes out, and especially after that May 16th full reveal, we'll definitely break that down for you guys. But for now, that will do it for us for this edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It does make a huge difference. Also, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, all of the social pages for content and updates. We have so many people doing incredible work across every sport you could possibly think of. So if you need anything, come on over to GSMC and we have you covered. But thank you once again for listening, and you guys have a wonderful day.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.